Hello, ladies. Welcome to today's episode, today's edition of Tech in Ghana, London. It's so lovely to have you all join us. How are you all doing today?
Doing great.
Doing good, thanks.
It's good. Okay, so obviously today we're going to be talking about funding, access to finance, um, ability to, I guess, source, receive finance, the trajectory, the landscape when it comes to finance, especially for women in tech and women in Ghana. And I also would like to look at how we could talk about women in tech because I know quite a lot of you work in the tech landscape. So before we begin, everyone, just quick introductions. My name is Tonisha Tagoe. I am the founder and creator of the Ladies Entrepreneurship Club. I have a strong passion for female entrepreneurship, not just because I'm a woman or they're women, but because usually the types of businesses that female entrepreneurs do found are in themselves job creators, right? And that's not to say men don't do it too, but the types of businesses that women create are special, and I actually fall for those types of businesses naturally. So that's me, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's session. I would really appreciate if the three of you could introduce yourselves next. So if we could go with Oyin, Kristin, and then Miishe, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you very much for the invitation. So I am Oyin Solebo. I am based between London and Lagos. I am a senior advisor for various VCs and entrepreneurship support organizations. And if anyone actually wants to, if any female founders out there want to share with me what they are doing, I am actively looking for more female founders, so please do get in touch via LinkedIn. But my background, I have a couple of decades worth of experience across investment banking, being a founder myself, and strategy consulting, and most recently launched and led the Techstars Accelerator into the African continent, where I invested in 24 companies, 50% of which had female founders.
Wow, thank you. Kristin.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me as well. Good to be here, good to see you all again, all familiar faces, so that's good. I'm Kristin Wilson, Managing Partner of Innovate Africa Fund and Chief Strategy Officer at Spurt. Both of these organizations are focused on enabling capital and technical support, technical assistance resources to innovators that are problem solving for the continent.
Thank you, Kristin. Thank you. Miishe?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Miishe Addy-Asare. I'm CEO and co-founder of Jetstream Africa. We are an e-logistics and financing company that focuses on cross-border trade, so any type of shipment that's going between two countries. We also serve banks and investors in doing something called collateral management, which means monitoring goods, monitoring cargo and inventory for trade finance deals. It's a pleasure to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much, ladies. So I guess, I was given a really interesting opening quote that I think it would be great for us to start this discussion with. It says, in Ghana, only 1% of funding was raised by female CEOs in the first half of last year, which is down 95% year on year. This is a source from Ghana's Startup Innovation Ecosystem Report for 2024. And the question, I guess, is what more do you feel should be done to reverse this downward trend? But I don't want us to just start there, okay? I think if and where there's opportunity and ability to add context before you start would be amazing. So I'll kick off with a little bit of context to give you it's a big question for the opening question. But for example, I find with the Ladies Entrepreneurship Club, a huge factor there year on year on our side is I see that less and less women are actually applying or trying to get investors and investment. Oh, yeah, I see you're nodding, right? So there's a huge piece of context missing from there. And of course, I'm not a panelist today, so I'm not going to answer. But it's those kind of thoughts that I would like you to add into this. So of course, we want to look at how to reverse the downward trend, but we also want to look at that in a clean and clear context and whether or not this downward trend is actually something that's selected by the participants we're discussing or not. All right. So who would like to go first?
Happy. Yeah, I'm happy to go first, as you saw me nodding.
Yeah.
I think it is very important that we do talk about the structural issues that are also part of this. And I think someone like Miishe would be great to speak about this because she's experienced firsthand as a female founder some of these challenges. But given that you are also pointing towards the role of the female founder, I think definitely there is more that the women founders can do. So I have seen firsthand that women do not apply for programs when they hear about them because they do not believe that they are ready. It is far more likely that I will get a man hand over essentially a piece of paper and an idea and ask for several $1 million worth of funding and believe he is ready. Whereas a female founder is more likely to be overly ready, have more of a track record, and still tell me that she is not ready. In fact, I was recently, just over the last month, working with 9 founders who were incredible, who were all going up for a pot of $4 million worth of debt funding. 3 of them were women and 6 of them were men. It was 2 of the women that were telling me that they felt nervous openly speaking about their impressive credentials. And it was all 3 of the women that were told by the funders that they didn't ask for enough money, that they just were not aggressive enough, and that they had enough to demonstrate that they were actually worthy of a lot more capital that they were asking for. So I think there certainly is a thing around women not believing in themselves, not believing that they are ready, and even when they are ready, not asking for enough. I also find one of the interesting things I found when I was running the Techstars Accelerator program is that a lot of women either didn't know about the program as well. And one of the reasons they didn't know about the program is because they were less likely to share the information that they had in their networks. I find that in a lot of male networks, they are more likely to have conversations around business and how they can be supporting each other. But for whatever reason, it doesn't happen as frequently in the women networks. So I think that there are things that we can do, right? We can, as women founders in the audience, support each other more. So if you find some information that isn't relevant to you, but it's relevant to someone else, share it. If you get invited to speak on a panel, but you can't make it, deliberately recommend another woman, promote each other on LinkedIn. If you feel nervous going to events, go together, refer each other to, investors in your community. If you're part of a WhatsApp group full of great investors and you see that another woman founder isn't there, deliberately invite her into that. I think these are things, tangible things that all women founders can do to help us reverse this trend.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think, and especially some of the ways in which you approach that, because I think that they seem so insignificant, so intangible, right? And they're also the kind of things that can be easily forgotten. Seeing a particular opportunity, it doesn't work for me, and who do I share that onto? But I think that there's also possibly a wider aspect there, which we won't cover now, maybe in another topic, because another question. But I think also with that lack of sharing about opportunities, there's also lack of sharing about what female entrepreneurs are up to. Because also lots of times, I know things about my members that other people don't know. So like I will know a member has a particular company and that person has never told anyone else, right? So then even the ability for them to be told about opportunities for funds and investment never comes to them because no one actually knew that they were actually a candidate. So very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Miishe, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I have there's a small entrepreneur female founder group that I'm a part of here in Ghana. Most of us in that group have raised funds, and I would say the thing that we all have in common is probably that we're aware of how venture capital works, how private equity works, how grant making works. And that might be a difference between sort of the general smart entrepreneurial women population and the folks who have been raising. There's some good research out there about kind of the types of businesses that are suited for different types of capital. And I think that sometimes the media's focus on just venture capital really obscures the wide universe of funding opportunities that can actually be better suited for profitable businesses or better suited for social impact businesses. So as more information comes out about non-dilutive grants and private credit and private equity at the growth stage, I'm actually really encouraged by that, because I know many women who are entrepreneurs, and just a small fraction of them are actually building, VC style businesses. And the job creating businesses, the ones that I think are actually the most interesting in many cases, aren't a good fit for VC. Mm-hmm. So I do think that the knowledge and awareness about the different types of funding available and understanding your alignment with a certain type of investor is a big part of raising capital. And I'll speak from my own specific kind of experience. When we started Jetstream, our first round of institutional funding really was VC, and the tech platform was the part of the growth vision, et cetera, and it was really the focus. As we started to incorporate finance and trade finance into our business model, the economics of our company changed, and we just became a more profitable company. The growth path also just became more sustainable, i.e. slower. And that actually is a better fit for private equity than it is for venture capital. It doesn't make it a bad business, it just makes it a different type of business. My experience raising in Africa, and you can probably tell by my accent, I was born in Texas, but I'm like, I have a super Ghanaian name because my family is Ghanaian. But my experience raising private equity in Africa is that it's actually a lot easier to raise private equity here. The private equity investors on the continent understand how businesses grow here. They're not reading scripts from Silicon Valley and trying to apply those scripts. Yeah. They're very women friendly, and there's some women-owned funds that are doing this type of private equity. And so I would just urge the audience, if you're looking to raise, you're thinking about what type of investor fits with your model. Ignore the tech so-and-so articles that you're reading about, so-and-so raising, $10 million for their AI tech business. If that isn't what you're building, that's not what you're passionate about bringing into the world, there are funding options for you. They're just maybe less well covered.
Thank you. I love that. And I actually think that aspect is one of the key reasons that you're in this discussion. So I'm keen for us to dive a lot more into that path shortly. Kristin, is there any context you want to add? I know that you run a fund yourself, so I'm really keen to hear from your perspective as well.
Yeah, no, I loved hearing Miishe sort of sub the VCs. It was great because I think that there's a lot of truth there. But I think just pulling on the threads from both Oyin and Miishe, what I will say is that one is definitely about knowledge, right? So Miishe's point about success being tied to how much knowledge these women have about what the right options are for them. I think that that's underrated. I think what's happened is that VC is definitely thrown in everyone's faces. And if you can imagine, in many cases, entrepreneurship comes from a place of need, a place from necessity, particularly in this part of the world. So that overrepresentation sometimes of venture capital does mean that other really valid, really useful sources can get crowded out, especially if you're not in an ecosystem that is already sort of informed or where you have access to different things, right? So if you maybe didn't grow up in a family with, lots of businessmen or entrepreneurs who had built businesses and got their capital from friends and banks and, programs and things like that, right? If your only introduction to building a company is what you've seen online or whatever, then you're probably going to be chasing a line that isn't fantastic for you. So I really think that that's a super important point around just the information, the education, the knowledge. And then I will say that I think a thread, the subtle thread of Oyin's contribution is also a really important one to draw. around how women founders or women entrepreneurs, or perhaps even women in general, present themselves. I think that one of the things that you'll notice is that people who are able to access certain kinds of opportunities are very often able to present narratives that suit them. So even if they failed at something or something didn't work out, or their accomplishments are really not that stellar relative to who else is standing in the room, their ability to kind of story tell around what it is that they've done, right, really then allows folks to sit up and say, oh, I'm going to listen to this person, or I'm going to pay attention to this person. Because whether we like it or not, people are, working with first impressions, whether we like it or not. Everyone loves a good story. And so I think that combination of being armed with information about what the best choices are for you, as well as being able to present yourself in the most compelling and beneficial light possible, is really important. I tell women founders all the time that as a fund manager, it's my analyst's job to figure out what's wrong with your business. It's not your job to tell me, right? It's your job to explain to me why this is a phenomenal, transformative opportunity. And so just resisting that urge to kind of self-deprecate your way out of opportunity, because mediocre people gas themselves up all the time, and you should probably try it. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so I think the next, well, there's a question in the audience, which also I think is a good question, and probably I should ask it just now. I think it ties into a little bit of what we've been discussing. But I think more so on Miishe's kind of perspective in terms of the lack of knowledge and awareness of what is available in terms of funding. So I want to ask this question. So it says, I wonder whether entrepreneurship is seen as a viable career path for women in Ghana. I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on this. And the reason I think that Miishe, this is more for you is because with the Ladies Entrepreneurship Club, what we try to do is we're always trying to provide training, right? Training skills to help these entrepreneurs be entrepreneurs, be able to work on their business, not just have a skill that they sell. Basically, just a self-employed person with a registered company for no reason. And so I think that even what you were just talking about in terms of funds goes into that knowledge. So I guess I think maybe you can pull a lot from this to inform on your thoughts of whether you do see it as a career path, or see if women see it as a career path in the first place in your experiences. And where you think the opportunities are to turn it into, from a perspective approach, like to turn it into something that is more, can more be seen as a career path as opposed to selling skills for money. And I hope my question makes sense. And then I think, Kristin, I just feel like you can also come in on that after. Oh yeah, of course, if you feel free as well. But I feel like I want to bring this in from this kind of really strong technical knowledge perspective, Miishe. So
yeah, so I mean, I think I've in my world, I've met many women, especially, who will go out in and out of periods of entrepreneurship in their lives. So they may start a company and sell it, or turn it into a lifestyle business and then take a job. And so it is in some ways a trade, in the sense that there are things to learn about being an entrepreneur that are specific to entrepreneurship. Raising money, in my view, is a trade. You're going to be better at it 2 years from now than you are today if you keep at it. Negotiating contracts, dealing with rejection, managing teams, all of those skills that are kind of core to creating a company and going from 0 to 1. Those are things that can be learned. There is a little bit of an instinct or a mindset that can't be taught. So I think that there are many people who might have, an entrepreneurial spirit or interest, but their best bet might be to run a a big project inside of a company that already exists. And a lot of these people who are entrepreneurs who will go work for a bigger company, and they'll have the stability of a steady paycheck, but they'll show qualities of entrepreneurship that are great within the big company. From my part, I'm just an operator, like the getting in the weeds, 0 to 1. One day I'm cleaning up something on the floor, the next day I'm talking to an investor. Like that dynamism of the job is part of what draws me to it. That being said, I think that it's important for people to think, especially in the age of AI, not really about careers or like choosing a specific career path, but more about the basket of skills that you have and the problems that you want to solve. It's probably not a great idea to say, I need to start this business, I need to be CEO, or I need to be CTO, or whatever it is, and it's going to do XYZ, because the market is so powerful, and it will discipline you. It'll tell you what it needs, and you have to be flexible. So I think that I'm not giving a very tight answer here, but I think that the way to think about what you want to do in entrepreneurship is really to think about the people you want to work with and the problems that you want to solve, and just have and I know probably everyone on this call does, but just have the humility to understand that it's going to be a long journey to getting to the place where you've mastered the trade. This is one of the hardest types of ways to make a living. It's not easy. So if your parents are pushing you to go to medical school or law school, it's a lot of studying, but it's a defined path. This is not a defined path. It is entirely possible that you can make $0 or 0 CDs. It's entirely possible that you can fail. So there are risks to entrepreneurship, which you kind of have to navigate in your own way. But if you do have that risk tolerance, you do have that passion, you do have that stubbornness where you just have to solve the problem and you can't think straight until it gets done, then you might be an entrepreneur. And that's sort of something you're going to have to navigate and figure out how to make it work with a living. Yeah.
Very, very, very true. Very interesting. Okay, thank you. Kristin, what about your thoughts from the investment perspective? Do you think it is important that entrepreneurship is seen as a career path? And do you think that there are tons of skills left or opportunities left or any opportunities left for it to be seen like that, both as the female entrepreneurs and as people in society around them?
Yeah, I think so. And I really do think, again, it boils down to the point around just genres of entrepreneurship, right? So I think that are many women that I'm seeing building venture, backable businesses? No. Are many women that I'm seeing building exceptional, interesting, complex scaling businesses? Yes. Right. So I think there's also really that question of what kinds of businesses, because again, the venture model is very, very specific to a certain, a particular kind of risk appetite and a particular kind of rate of growth. Right. Mm-hmm. And as you can imagine, just looking at practical things for a second, fortunately or unfortunately, I think some of this depends on your politics, but women in a society like ours have other things that they have to do, right? Mm-hmm. So they're not showing up to the boardroom or to the meeting room or to the factory. They're also showing up for their children. They're showing up for their spouses. They're showing up for the extended family. They're showing up for their spouse's family. They're showing up for their local community. All of that is labor. All of that is a burden, right? All of that is exertion of intellectual, physical, emotional capacity. Then add to that the extremely difficult work of building a company, right? There's a lot, right? And what that means is that when we say, is it a viable path? I think what we're really asking is that, is there enough bandwidth left, right? After all of these things for many women. And I think that many women do take on the challenge, right? And many women do excel at it. I think that the reason a question like this arises, I think, is because there's not enough visibility. I'm constantly stunned sometimes when I go to events or I'm introduced to somebody and I see just how much they've accomplished, but they're doing it in their quiet little corner of the world. They're not on my television or my LinkedIn feed every day. So I think some of it is also that we're missing some of these stories, right? We don't know how incredible Miishe's story is really, really incredible, and is one that I think more people should know. But I think that if you pulled, 10 random people off the street in a car and asked them if they knew her story, they probably don't, but they know the Zipe story, right? And so I think it's just visibility sometimes. And then the point you made at the very beginning about understanding context, right? And the context of this is there's a lot going on. And folks are still doing this, absolutely, but they're doing this in ways that we're perhaps not quite recognizing.
Very, very, like a bunch of thoughts went through my head just then. I don't it's so, okay, I just want to get Oyin to answer if you would like, but I think that I think from this point on, I think we are ready to talk about the actual finance. So with all this in mind, and I think Oyin, maybe you could start that when you end, like when you complete the last question. I think you're free to start that, because I feel like it will come naturally. With all this in mind, where next, right? With all this in mind, what happens next? What do we do? So I think I want us to get into that, but I really want to hear your perspectives, of course, because you're working with a lot of female entrepreneurs as well. So how are you finding this whole thing about whether or not entrepreneurship is a career or a viable career? We know it is, but the perspective.
Well, yeah, I mean, we lost Miishe, but I'll be real. Being an entrepreneur is quite often not a great decision. Quite often it's an irrational decision. Why do I say that? Because the likelihood of failure is higher than the likelihood of success. Miishe has spoken about it. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do. The odds are against you just when you kind of look statistically. And when you look at the the millionaires in the world, although we hear about the ultra, billionaires, the super, super rich, the reality is that the vast majority of millionaires are sitting in a corporate organization, getting a nice income and, getting their holidays paid for and et cetera, et cetera. You don't get that as an entrepreneur. So I think it's really, really important that the decision is made soberly. I hear far too many people say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a female boss. I want to be a, woman leader, etc. It shouldn't come from that. It should come from a place of, I have seen this problem and I am uniquely positioned to solve it. Or I have unique insights into that customer, into that domain that means that I am the best person to solve that. Unfortunately, instead, what happens is that it's glamorized. We see, TechCrunch, Tech Cabal, another founder has raised another $1 million. It seems like it's a sexy thing to do. Or we have individuals and women and men falling into it, not out of choice, but because there aren't enough jobs in the economy, which is a huge problem, probably for another podcast. For another webinar. So the reason that many of us are falling into entrepreneurship is perhaps, in my opinion, not the right one. It's I think the reality is it a viable career path? For some, but for others, it probably isn't the best decision for them to make. But regardless of whether or not you make that decision, I, again, piggyback on what Miishe said, there are certain skills that need to be developed. People go and study for 7 years to become a doctor. Why do we not see that you need to study in some shape or form to run a business? And some of that studying can be done on the job, but the rest of that should be done in your own time. If you aren't a finance expert, but you're fundraising, go and do a short course in financial modeling. Go and understand what the key metrics of success for your particular industry are. If you have never led a team, what makes you believe that you are going to be able to lead a team in a really difficult environment where probably the level of education and the level of expertise isn't what you need to really 10x your business? Go and do a course on leadership. If you haven't run complex operations, why should you expect that you should be able to do that, again, in a really, really complex environment? So, I would totally agree that it should be seen as a trade where women and men are looking at what specifically is needed for them to succeed and going out there and finding opportunities to advance their skill sets.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Okay, so I'm really glad we've covered that. Thank you so much. So I guess we are ready to talk about where next, right? Because that's in the scenario where we can look at, okay, these are probably like contextually, those what we've discussed is probably a decent amount of the people who don't come forward, don't apply, and are rejected, right? They haven't taken up the training, they haven't got the skills, they don't understand the landscape, they're not communicating what they do, they're not hearing from others because they're not putting themselves out there. So we've covered a lot of that initial ground, which I think contextually is so key, right? It's not just about blaming the funders and the investors and saying they're not investing in women, they're not investing in Africa, because first of all, they have to arrive at the door ready, right? So now let's move into the scenarios when people are at the door ready. I'd really like to, I guess, get your thoughts on, like, when people are ready, all of these factors we discussed before are no longer factors. What do you think the trends are in terms of funding towards women in Africa? What are you finding? So like I mentioned before, yes, of course, there's been a 95% drop year on year. However, Miishe, you sound super confident. Kristin, you run a fund. Oyin, I think you're also running a fund and you're eagerly looking for the women. So I think the first part of our conversation was about that search, right? Like, they need to come forward, they need to shine the light. But when you found them, and you realize that they're good and they're getting funding, what are you seeing in the market? What are you seeing in the landscape about finance? Where is it going? What are they looking for? Miishe, you discussed earlier, like, the different types of funds and what they're looking for. What are you finding the trends to be now? Where should women who are able to build these businesses or build businesses, where should they be looking for 2025? And in terms of current trends, if they're actually looking for something that will be funded, as opposed to if they're just trying to build a business out of passion or love or job creation. I think, Miishe, if you go first on that, and then Oyin, and then Kristin, I think that would be really good. Bear in mind we have 9 minutes, so make these, like, no pressure, but if you could just make these like super powerful, like, gem dropping responses where it's every other sentence, we're blown away. So we can make the most of these last 10 minutes for those who feel that they are ready. That'd be amazing. Thank you.
Sure. So the first topic I'll address is where, and the second is who. So again, because I schooled in the US, people think that most of our capital at Jetstream came from the US, and it did not. Most of our cap capital came from Nigeria. So the most important thing, I think, for people who are fundraising to do is look for investors who are aligned. And in my opinion, if you're building a company that's specific to the African continent, your investors are here. That doesn't mean they're necessarily in your town or in your country, but if you think sort of holistically about what are the regions of the continent that have similar problems where my solution might scale to those regions, then that can be a promising way to raise. The second question is who. So we have, Jetstream has a mix of capital. We have some from institutions, we have some from development finance institutions that are connected with governments, et cetera. In almost all of our investments in the top, I would say the top 10 shareholders that we have, there's a woman involved. And oftentimes that woman is at the senior level, sometimes she's at the junior level. So I will say that there is something like affinity, like the feeling that someone has when they get you or they understand you. And I don't want to discount the power of women investors and the power of women LPs and creating that pull so that when you're showing up to the pitch meeting and you're sort of on the borderline, it's the woman who's often giving you the benefit of the doubt, or someone who is pro-woman. It could be a man who just feels like, it's time. This reminds me of my sister. This reminds me of my mother. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's a really powerful soft factor.
Well, thank you. Oyin, I think you were next, right? Yes.
Yeah, sure. So I think the answer of where you go to depends on what kind of business you are running. So the nature of venture capital, and it's been spoken about slightly here, but the nature of venture capital is that venture capitalists are looking for companies that are going to 10x their return within, let's say, 5 years and have some kind of exit. That means that if you're running an SME that is growing at a steady pace year on year, employing loads of people, that's great, but isn't going to exit to another tech company, if your unit economics aren't such that you can scale massively without increasing them because of the use of technology, then you are not you are not a VC venture. However, if you are a venture-backable venture, I think the great thing is that there are actually so many funds in the African context that have a woman in leadership, or at least at the principal level, right? We've got funds that are led by women. We've got the likes of an Aggressive Capital led by Maya, or a Health Cap led by Ola Brown, or an Arua Capital, where these are female or woman-led funds. And obviously we have got Kristin on the line as well to represent that. And then we've got partners at great funds. We've got, the likes of Alexi or a Norskin or a NECA or a Vested World. The list actually does go on. So I actually think that we are in a great position if you are looking for venture-backed funds. If you aren't, however, there are alternatives. So we don't talk about working capital enough. We know that women-led businesses are more financially sustainable and use their finances in a more sustainable way than male-led businesses. Therefore, working capital is more of an option, I think, for a lot of women businesses, but we don't look to that as much as we perhaps look for VC funding. And then obviously private credit. So we are seeing an increase in the percentage of capital that is going to in venture debt versus equity. So again, for any organization out there which can prove that they are building for long-term sustainability, where they can return that debt, venture debt becomes an option. And then lastly, I will say impact funds, right? If you're running a business where your main KPI isn't necessarily return, but it is about women inclusion or financial inclusion or job creation, then impact investors or even grant providers is a place that you should look for. What I will also just say finally, I know we're almost out of time, is that there is a growing understanding that this is an issue. So even though women are only getting 2% of VC funding, there is a growing understanding that this is an issue, and it's not just an issue that we need to solve because it's the right thing to do. We also need to solve it because it makes financial sense because of the financial viability of so many women-led businesses. So yeah, the data isn't great, but I do actually think that there are things that are happening which will help reverse that trend.
Thank you again. And just, Miishe and Oyin, I just want to say you have dropped so many words that I'm sure the Tech in Ghana team probably will have quite a bit of work to do in terms of probably creating some sort of a document, a list of all the, the phrases, organizations, the women to look out for, the funds, etc. And so I hope that everyone that's been listening, you've been able to keep up. But Kristin, I think it's actually poignant for you to have the last word as a fund yourself.
Did we lose Tonisha? Or is that just me? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. I kind of lost you there for a bit.
No, I was saying, I think it's quite poignant for you to have the last word, especially as a fund yourself.
Yes, no. So I think, and the point was made earlier around, understanding that you're going to get better the more you do this, right? And I think that is the sort of maybe thing that I want to leave folks with is to keep up the bet on yourself, right? So to find that information that you need to keep trying, to keep getting better, to keep getting more informed, to surround yourself with those people that are doing what you're trying to do, people who understand what you're trying to do, and really build that village around you. I think that's what I would say that women founders can do, because I really think it's the most important thing is don't give up on that bet on yourself, because that grit and that perseverance is really going to get you where you need to get to. Very, very few people get that yes first walk in the door. Very few.
Thank you. I mean, I think we've got about 2 minutes to go, and I will ask for just the last kind of closing word. And I think in terms of that final closing statement, it would be really great just to have I teach something called unplanning to my female entrepreneurs, and it's thinking about a problem in reverse, and then getting to the final point where the final point on that list is literally something you could get up and do right now. right? So we've got a huge problem. We're breaking it down in reverse, and we end up with what we could do right now. So if each of you could kind of give a direction, like to a female entrepreneur, whether in Ghana or anywhere in the African continent, or African focused, or as Miishe said, even from the US, most of her funds came from Africa. So something that's like, get up and go and do this now. If we want to reverse the problem, it has to be reversed by the participants themselves taking an action. So while you think about that, I'm just going to read a couple of sections from the chat. I see Huda Safe says, very helpful comment, as the term entrepreneurship is often seen as optional. Oh, there it is. Optional for everyone. I think building skills in the field could be a great investment in and of itself. And I think that that's really been echoed by all of, everyone here, especially with the fact that, as you said, Kristin, it's very rare that you'll get the funds the first time round. And entrepreneurship is a journey to self-discovery. It's a failure, but a learning through failure journey. So really, really interesting there. Thank you for sharing that, Huda. Ashman said, how do we find them? This has been a question for some of us. Where do you go? Who's willing to guide you through it? Well, I mean, cheeky plug, but the Ladies Entrepreneurship Club, that is literally all we do, is provide training to female entrepreneurs. I know that I've come across, in my Googling of my guests, I've come across the fact that all of our panelists, they are constantly sharing knowledge. I think that oftentimes, yes, we can look towards institutions, but as a dean myself, when I work, I don't recommend universities. We don't actually train entrepreneurs. We don't make entrepreneurs. So I would say, don't go to university. Stick to the real world organizations that say they do this in real life, and obviously always go to the people who are doing it. So you've got 3 amazing women in the space, succeeding in the space. I would say the first step you can take from me, in terms of opening up this dialogue about first step, is going and having a look at what they've done. And Oyin has definitely said she's looking for female entrepreneurs now. So I think that that's the point there. And Afua says, the framework of viewing entrepreneurship as a trade is a huge shift. And with that, the mindset will set us up for success. Thank you for sharing. Totally agree. So I think, so we don't lose any more time. It would be really great to have the last word from each of you. And I think, Kristin, I seem to put you last quite often. I don't know how I do that. So we'll go Kristin, Oyin, and then Miishe, and you can have the last word.
Okay, but I needed help with your prompt again. You were saying reversing the. Yes, I didn't quite understand.
Yeah, so we started with the big problem, right? And we've broken it all the way down, right? And I was saying it's something I do quite often with my female entrepreneurs, and we always try to end on what you can do right now. So
okay, one thing.
In a very good way, yes. So what is? Just tell them one thing they can go off and do right now.
Okay, so I would say the one thing to do right now as a woman entrepreneur on this conversation is go look at your numbers and make sure you understand them.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Oyin?
I would say back yourself and back others. So, question out there, all of the women entrepreneurs on the line, how many of you shared this with another woman? I don't know how many women are here, but I wonder how many of us actually shared this with another woman. So back yourselves, back others by sharing knowledge, promoting each other on LinkedIn, referring each other to investors, referring each other to events, inviting each other to WhatsApp groups. Think about the practical things that you can do to actually build community and back yourselves and others.
Thank you. And Miishe?
Yeah, so after this call, Tonisha, I'll send you a list of investors that I have, and most of them have rejected me, and that's cool, but other people should benefit from the list. So if you're interested in raising funds, you think that's a good fit for your company, reach out to Tonisha, ask her for the list or an investor, and just call an investor. Don't expect money, just expect to hear some real talk, and it's going to be good.
Thank you. I think that's been amazing. And it's, I just want to say, even personally for me, as well as I can see for our audience, it has been really, really, really refreshing and interesting to have this conversation. When I saw the topic, I felt it was going to go one way. But I feel like you've all added just such an interesting perspective to it. So I really want to say thank you for myself and the Tech in Ghana team for joining us today on today's LinkedIn Live episode discussing the future and the prospects of women in business and funds and financing. Before we go, I don't know if anyone has noticed the little scrolling bar at the bottom. we do have the Tech in Ghana conference happening in London. That's going to be happening on the 10th of June at Addy-Asare Goddard, which is it's I think it's roughly in central London-ish. But visit techinghanaconference.com to learn more specifically about that, about the location, about registration, about who else is going to be there. These discussions are such a tiny drop in the massive ocean of the Tech in Ghana conference. I was lucky enough to meet Kristin at the last one I went to in Ghana, and I can only imagine how amazing the one in London is going to be. So I highly suggest, if you're thinking of what to do next, also maybe go to that website, have a look. And even if you find yourself unable to attend for any reason, you have no good reason why you can't, look at the list, especially like the list Miishe said, look at the list, who will be there, who's talking about things, and go and follow up and learn from them up online. So thank you very much, everyone. It has been amazing. I think Emma's just put the link into the chat. And I look forward to seeing you in London. Thank you.
Great job, Tonisha.
Thanks. Thanks.